MAGA, the last breath of the Confederacy. Here is a historical and political examination. MAGA Republicans have launched an unprecedented assault on our democracy, rights, and freedoms. Their dangerous agenda seeks to undermine U.S. elections, ban abortion nationwide, and end bedrock programs such as Social Security, all while inciting political violence against anyone who disagrees. Today, we will present the argument and counter-arguments while connecting history, symbolism, and current political debates.
Okay, guys, apparently this tip of the spear has entered the Capitol building.
Is the MAGA movement the last breath of the Confederacy? For MAGA supporters, that question sounds outrageous. But these same people, decisions, and actions show otherwise.
This is a huge victory for these protesters. They have disrupted the system in an enormous way.
So many of them are just patriotic, well-loving Americans.
They're like kind of solid Americans.
They're not violent. They're not troublemakers.
Private citizens, it seemed, on their way to look at the Capitol.
And for all others, it really explains everything. MAGA and the Confederate Legacy. Part 1. The Historical Argument. The Confederacy officially ended in 1865, but many historians argue its political and cultural legacy never truly disappeared. After the Civil War came Jim Crow law systems, designed to preserve white political power across the South through segregation, intimidation, and voter suppression. The Civil Rights Movement challenged that system, leading to laws like the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Part 2. Redistricting and Representation. Today, critics draw parallels between that history and modern fights over voting rights and redistricting. Who draws the lines? Following Supreme Court rulings that weakened parts of the Voting Rights Act, new redistricting battles erupted across southern states, including Alabama. The new maps highlighting majority black communities divided into multiple districts. Supporters of these changes argue race should not dominate. How districts are drawn and say accusations of racism are politically motivated. Saying race shouldn't dominate redistricting sounds neutral, but in a country where race has always shaped political power, ignoring it doesn't create fairness. It preserves the status quo. Critics argue these maps dilute minority voting power, echoing older systems that limited black political influence during the Jim Crow era. Bottom line, ignoring race in redistricting doesn't make maps colorblind, it makes inequality invisible. Fair representation requires seeing the whole picture. A U.S. District Court on Tuesday, May 26, 2026, blocked a Republican-drawn congressional map in Alabama from going into effect, writing that the district lines intentionally discriminated based on race in violation of the Constitution. FYI, Alabama was originally blocked in 2023 for trying to use this same racially discriminatory map in 2023. Republicans said they would immediately appeal the decision back to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court earlier this month allowed Alabama to proceed with redistricting, kicking the process back down to the lower court. Alabama Governor Ivey said, "Our legislature knows our state, our people in our districts better than federal courts or activist groups do." And Alabamians know U2K. She participated in a 1967 college skit where Kay and other sorority members wore the blackface. By the way, has also been governor of Alabama since 2017.
As I look at my fiancée across the room, I can see her that night. She had on a pair of blue coveralls, and she had put some black paint all over her face, and she was, we were acting out this skit called Cigar Butts.
Would you like to defend yourself from this low position that he's placed you in now? Well, that was just my role for the evening.
When the blackface controversy surfaced, she apologized. But then she was rejected by the Supreme Court for racial discriminatory maps in 2023, and then again in 2026, only to appeal the decision in the U.S. Supreme Court, ultimately clearing the way for Alabama to use the 2023 racial discriminatory congressional map. Makes you wonder just how sincere was the blackface apology. Part 3. Symbolism and Identity. Another reason critics connect MAGA to the Confederacy is symbolism. Flags, statues, rhetoric. At most MAGA political rallies, Confederate imagery and praise for Confederate figures have appeared alongside modern nationalist rhetoric. Supporters reject comparison, arguing the movement is about nationalism, border security, economic frustration, and distrust of political elites, not racial supremacy. But dismissing comparisons to racial supremacy overlooks a critical reality. When policies, rhetoric, or symbols consistently target, dehumanize, or exclude specific racial or ethnic groups, the impact matters as much as the intent. Rejecting scrutiny doesn't prove a movement is race-neutral. It often shields it from accountability. To critics, and to those it affects, this represents the continuation of white grievance politics in a modern form. Part 4. Generational Shift. Young voters, diverse crowds, southern cities growing, begins to shift hopeful. But American, the South, are changing. New generations, new South. Younger and more diverse generations increasingly reject racial division and culture war politics, reshaping Southern political identity. For them, the future of the South may depend on whether it can move beyond the racist ghosts of its past. So, is MAGA the last breath of the Confederacy? Well, same philosophy and modern methods formulated and devised through the abuse of power or authority, systemic, political, and emotional abuse. Making America great again, or so they say. Like it was during slavery in the 1600s through the 1800s, like it was during Reconstruction collapse, which brought forth Jim Crow laws and segregation during the late 1870s to the mid-1960s, like in 1921, the Tulsa Race Massacre, where white supremacists destroy the prosperous Black Wall Street in Oklahoma, underscoring rising racial terror. How about like during the fight for civil rights for African Americans and minorities in the mid-1960s? Like in the 1960s, when the National Guard was called in, having to force the state of Alabama to desegregate? FBI's COINTELPRO operations in the early 1970s, unconstitutionally targeted, harassed and disrupted black civil rights and liberation groups such as the Black Panther Party, to actively destroy their political influence. And then there was the Rodney King beating in the early 1990s. Do you remember? Or maybe like during the 2000s, with even more systemic racism and police brutality. Killings of people like Trayvon Martin, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd, to name only a few. According to history, at what point are we making America great again? Or when only certain Americans had full access to freedom and opportunity? History forces us to ask a difficult question. Great for who? Because for many communities, the America some people want to return to was never equal, never fair, and never truly free. History never truly disappears. It evolves. And always, always remember this.
Hey,
brother, we're boots on the ground here. We're moving on to Capitol now. I'll give you a boots on the ground update here in a few.
Multiple Capitol entries! Multiple Capitol entries! Take the building! Fuck you, police! Even track, we are still taking metal, sharpened objects, missiles, to include bottles and rocks, and hand-thrown chemical-grade fireworks.
MAGA, the insurrectionist next door. In the words of author Fintan O'Toole, white savage. And what are your thoughts?